Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the May MTA Board Meeting and the annual FMTAC meeting, the first mutual transportation assurance company, which is MTA's captive insurer. General Counsel Paige Graves will provide an update on quorum for the record. Paige.
Thank you, Chair Lieber. We have a quorum.
Thanks, Paige. Before we hear from public speakers, we have our usual brief safety announcement. We hope.
Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you and have a safe day.
Thank you. Lucille, can you lead us through the public speaker section of the
Absolutely. Good morning. We have 20 members of the public registered to speak today. We ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA rules of conduct and decorum. As a reminder to public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Our first speaker today is Kara Lieberwitz, followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Hi, my name is Kara Leibowitz. I am the Advocacy Coordinator for the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. I am also a born and bred Long Islander who will be moving to Brooklyn next month to be closer to my job. When I sent in my recertification for Nassau County's Able Ride Paratransit system, I was able to provide medical information on my application from my physical therapist, who I know and trust. That information was sufficient for Able Ride. But when I apply for Accessoride after my move, I'll be forced to go to an in-person assessment, which may not be near my apartment or even in the borough of Brooklyn. At the assessment, I may be asked to walk, climb stairs, and perform other activities to prove that I am eligible for the service. I will not be able to schedule my own appointment at a time that is convenient for me. Accessoride simply expects you to be available whenever they schedule your appointment. This process tells me 2 things about what the MTA thinks of disabled people who use paratransit. 1, that you do not trust us and our medical providers to provide accurate information regarding our own disabilities and capabilities. 2, that you do not see our time as valuable. This process is rooted in stereotypes that disabled people are somehow simultaneously faking or exaggerating their disabilities in order to game the system, and also just sitting at home waiting for Accessoride to bring us to our medical appointments. The increase in service denials after the in-person assessment process was expanded in 2007 proves that the MTA is using these assessments to save money by denying service to people they feel are not disabled enough. The MTA should abolish the in-person assessments altogether. A significant amount of money could be saved as the MTA would no longer have to pay to operate centers, and the MTA would no longer have to shoulder the cost of the free rides to and from the assessments. If other paratransit systems can operate without relying on in-person assessments, Accessoride can too. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlton D'Souza, followed by Jessica Murray.
Good morning, MTA Board. So on Sunday, there was a big shooting, and we lost a life. And I want this board to realize that our subway system is not safe. Yesterday, I was on a subway train. 2 guys come storming in the train, and they come without masks, coming into people's faces, singing to them. This is the type of stuff that's infuriating riders. We need a top level of security underground. And I'm going to keep pushing this narrative until you guys get it right. We need cameras in the subway cars. We need metal detectors, and we need to make sure that every station has private security guards, especially overnight at the turnstiles. The West 10th Street entrance at the West 4th Street subway station on 6th Avenue, you have people there selling drugs, using needles right in the open, and that's a big station overnight. So I'm going to take the media on undercover tours to see what's going on overnight and to expose what's happening in New York City Transit. Because, I don't know what's going on with this board, but you guys need to pay attention to that. As far as the Queens bus redesign, my board and my team, as well as many residents of Queens who've come together, we are not going to be supporting the Queens bus redesign. There's some big issues that we have with it, and I was very, very patient to wait for all the incoming testimony and things. So we're having a big meeting in College Point on Monday, June 6th, from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. I need all the Queens residents, I need the board members, elected officials, all you guys are invited. But I need a commitment from you, Mr. Chairman, that you're going to send 2 representatives to this Queens bus redesign meeting that we're holding. We're anticipating close to 400 to 500 people to show up. So Monday, June 6th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And we have the space till 9:30 if needed. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Murray, followed by Alita Dupree.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Murray. I'm a member of the Rise and Resist Elevator Action Group, and now I'm a resident squeaky wheel as the chair of the Advisory Committee on Accessibility, or ACTA. I'm here to say welcome to Mr. Davey. I thought about speaking at Monday's meeting, but I really wanted to hear what you had to say first. I support your goals for safety, improving customer service in paratransit, and making the agency more innovative. But the one word I was really hoping to hear more of was accessibility. You probably know that accessibility was one of Andy Byford's 4 main priorities, and with his support, a plan for major investment in elevators is part of the current capital program. But that investment will only get us to a subway system that is not quite halfway accessible. We're still waiting for a long-term plan to make all stations accessible. Accessibility ties into all of your goals. Stations that are not accessible are not safe. Disabled passengers are your customers, and they deserve to have access to the same information, whether or not they can see or hear, whether or not they can speak English or not. Paratransit is a crucial lifeline for many people, but there are far more disabled people who get around on mass transit. So the bus and subways must work for them as well. In private industry, accessibility is at the heart of innovation, and companies are finally discovering the benefits of diverse workforces that include people with different disabilities. When Byford started back in 2018, we invited him to join us on a subway ride so we could show him some of the problems. And we'd like to invite you to do the same. Now you can do this without even leaving your house. There's a film called The Biggest Obstacle, which shows many of the accessibility problems that remain beyond elevators. It's available to stream on thebiggestobstacle.com. And of course, if you'd like to go for an in-person ride along, we'd be happy to do that too. We're grateful for the progress that's been made in the last 4 years, but there's so much more to do. We hope we can work together with you on accessibility. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alita Dupree, followed by Chris Drummond.
Thank you again, Chair Giano, Lieber, and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, my pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you. Never have enough Grand Central Terminal, especially the clock. It's very accurate. I can trust it. It runs off the atomic clock, so we should let people know that Grand Central is not just a beautiful, stately building, but it's accurate as well. So thank you. I did watch some of the Transit Committee meeting, and I'm very encouraged about us doing Omni for reduced fare. I'm looking forward to it because I use reduced fare, and I don't want to have to do full fare when I come back to New York. Hopefully that will be soon. So let's keep working on that. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you last month. There's a railway in California, LA, called Metrolink, and they're using renewable diesel fuel. So we have to think, how can we do that? And make sure that whenever we're on electric territory, we should be running on electricity. and that electricity should be renewable. I'm doing this in my home, and I think we can scale it up. And again, as a person with disabilities, I think we need to keep working very hard on building elevators and escalators and other things to help us get around, because it's hard for me sometimes climbing out of a deep subway station, especially if I have a mask on. And some people can't. So we want to make sure that we can have full participation on our system. And safety in the subway is especially important. And I'm not going to go into the details here. You've probably heard a lot of it in other places. But there is a lot of work to do. And we don't want to have money floating around on the system. I read that in Sydney, Australia, they don't have physical money floating around on the system. We're a world-class city and we can do it too. But I believe in this system. I'm going to use it when I come home. I'm looking forward to it. And it's a system that is a legendary and stately institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Drummond, followed by John Padula.
Good morning. My name is Chris Drummond. I'm a conductor in RTO. And this vest is the vest worn by platform controllers. The platform controllers was a special unit that consisted of 64 specially trained conductors that were assigned to high-value stations, such as Penn Station, 149th Grand Courts, and a dozen others. And this program was a valuable resource, and was a set of eyes and ears for the public. And they kept our train crew safe. They kept you safe. They would say, stand clear of the closing doors. Move away from the platform. Please watch your steps stepping out the train. Please enter the train carefully. Unfortunately, this program was disbanded a little over a year ago. Our 64 platform controllers, there's 8 left in the B division and like 12 left in the A division. This program had the most dedicated and professional conductors, dispatchers, and train service operators. We are in perilous times right now. We need these platform controllers who are familiar with the stations, familiar with the customers, vigilant for any suspicious activity, would adhere to sick passengers and suspicious activity. The transit has an obligation to make sure that they utilize every resource to make sure our train crews and our passengers are safe. And I know this is about transit, about statistics and numbers. Post-pandemic, 60% of our ridership has returned. And unfortunately, 75% of our platform controllers program is still depleted. Bring back the platform controllers program. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is John Padula, followed by Brian Burke.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Padula, and I'm a supervisor with Educational Vision Services. We are the District 75 program that is responsible for providing services to our city's blind and low vision students. I'm also a member of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility. I'd like to start this morning by welcoming our new transit president, Mr. Richard Davies. As a young administrator myself, it was so encouraging to hear you speak with such optimism and confidence on Monday about your new position, given what you now have before you on your plate. I'd like to think about everything that's happening from a disability perspective. I'd like to tell you about one of my blind students in Brooklyn who nearly fell down a flight of subway stairs because he was pushed from behind. Luckily, there was an adult with him that kept him from falling. I'd also like to tell you about a situation on a G train with one of my mobility teachers working with another blind teenager. She prevented him from sitting on a seat that had dry feces all over it. I don't know. Are these incidents a big deal? Would this stuff have happened regardless in our beloved subway pre-pandemic? I don't know. Food for thought. But I've been riding the trains myself of late, and you sit there and you have time and you wonder, how safe is it really down here? If New Yorkers, typical New Yorkers, don't feel so safe, am I at any more risk or less risk as a blind person? What about people in wheelchairs? What about people that have mobility issues? Is there a safety plan? What happens when the poop hits the fan and there's an emergency? Look, we got a lot of issues. We got to work together. Mr. Davey, I heard you say that we just need to get stuff done. Well, we need to improve things across the board because Access-a-Ride is not a viable option as it stands. So, like I said, we just need to work together, and we got to fix this piece by piece. Thank you all. My name is John Padula. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brian Burke, followed by Elizabeth Valdez. Brian Burke. Mr. Burke, you need to unmute.
All right. Yeah, I'm on. I got you. Okay. Yes. Good morning. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Davey for his presidency. I have to inform your office that I have been the victim of criminal activity by the board, specifically by the New York City Transit Authority, specifically by the Department of Law. Mr. Daniel Chu has been defrauding various courts by telling them that I've been paid monies. I'm owed monies, I believe it's over $200,000, primarily of differential since 2015 as retaliation for my protected activity, including substantiate injury on duty. I was hired in 2001 as a train operator and assigned to Ground Zero. And it appears that I after that suffered some injury from that. So I am out of substantiated injury on duty. And I just wish to inform you, and maybe we could get a reset here. I have spoken with other members of the board and your predecessor, Mr. Byford, about this. And apparently there was some instigation by the former governor who apparently held a personal grudge against me for some cases I filed, including regarding the Taylor Law. So anyway, this is an opportunity, I believe, because obviously you personally are not responsible, but at some point you would become responsible. And my understanding is you are in charge of the Department of Law, and certainly they are aware of this, and they're the ones producing the false instruments, which also involve perjury, subornation of perjury, obstruction of justice, false instruments for filing. And this are all predicate RICO acts. I don't believe that the authority wants to be convicted of RICO or enterprise corruption and should simply pay the monies owed. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Valdez, followed by Sasha Goldenson.
Good morning. So when it works, I'm here to attest to the success of the MTA's e-hail program, pleading for its expansion and permanent implementation as the primary accessible means of transportation for people with disabilities. That last-minute shopping spree for my son's Halloween costume, the trip to the Bronx when my parents needed me, an impromptu visit with my sister at the peak of the lockdown, just for sanity's sake, all were made possible through the e-hail program. Without the ease of the on-demand transportation, I'm unable to join the fully able-bodied New Yorkers as they participate in the rebirth of New York City post-COVID. The lack of accessible on-demand transportation limits me even further, this time to the limited commercial area within my neighborhood. The rigidity of the Access-a-Ride program makes it nearly impossible to visit with multiple doctors within a single day. Keep in mind, I can have upwards of 50 preventative medical appointments a year. Let's not forget, my presence here spotlights New York City inability to provide the necessary accommodations required by the 1990 ADA regarding public entities, specifically transportation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sasha Goldenson, followed by Victor Diaz-Rodriguez.
Good morning. I'm Sasha Blair Goldenson from the Elevator Action Group, and we've heard a lot about safety in our transit system, but less about accessibility, and we need to connect those issues. Accessibility is safety. And unlike identifying one dangerous person in a city of millions, this is one we can solve because we know where the danger is. It's at the 3/4 of stations with no elevators at all, and the 25 or so that are out of service every day. At those stations every day, there is clear and present danger. Let's get to that because those are accidents waiting to happen. People like me being carried up the stairs when the elevators go out, older adults struggling on stairs, delivery workers carrying hand carts, and caregivers with strollers teetering and tottering down those stairs like Malaysia Goodson was in 2019 when she fell and died. This is the safety issue that we should be focused on. And it doesn't grab headlines because we're all used to it. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be this way. In every other American city, it's completely accessible or more than half and getting there. We can get to this. And here's where I'll go off script a little and not entirely blame the MTA because you have constraints and we get that. You're trying. But there are other elected officials that we've elected, all of us, to protect us and enable you to do a good job and require you to do a good job. I'm talking about Governor Hochul, who controls the transit system, Speakers Hastie and Stewart Cousins. I'm talking about the comptrollers who need to audit the heck out of how you spend this money.
Thank you for your
So
comment.
it happens more efficiently and you get this done.
Please conclude your comment.
This is a danger. Accessibility is a safety issue. And we need to
Please conclude your public comment. Thank you. Our next speaker is Victor Diaz Rodriguez.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Diaz Rodriguez. I am the director of All Riders, a documentary short on the battle for accessibility in the New York City subway told by those fighting it. We recently screened at the IFC as part of Doc NYC, the largest documentary film festival in the country. The reason I made All Riders is also why I'm here today, because in January of 2019, Malaysia Goodson died carrying Riley, her 1-year-old daughter, in her stroller down subway stairs in Midtown. She was 22 years old. Mr. Davey, you have your work cut out for you. You've talked about safety, reliability, and cleanliness, but you haven't said much about accessibility thus far in your press conferences or in your op-ed on Metro, which I read. I want to challenge you, in good faith, on behalf of Malaysia's family and disability activists, to view those themes through the lens of accessibility. All of your stated goals as transit president go hand in hand with accessibility. Accessibility is safety, it is cleanliness, and it is reliability. It's going to be tough to get riders to feel comfortable again riding the trains. For the city's largest minority, the disabled community, how are they supposed to have a safe ride on the subway when it's not even accessible for them to ride it? Joe Rappaport was here on the 5th anniversary of the lawsuit BCID filed against the MTA. Here's another thing the MTA needs to do, Governor Hochul, I hope you're listening, is if you want to gain the public's trust, you need to settle these lawsuits. You can't keep dragging your feet like this. Unless you do so, it's going to be tough trusting you on fixing accessibility or any major issue. Richard, you got some great people around you, especially people like Hugh Arroyo. Listen to them, lean on them, but never forget to do the same for the disabled community. Because like they say, nothing about us without us. And they say that a good leader listens twice as much as he speaks because they have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So I wish you the best, but listen to the disability community and keep viewing accessibility as a safety issue. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bruce Hain, followed by Cassie Rafucci.
Good morning. Nice to be here again. This will not be an entirely sunny speech. This one's going to be more sunny at first, and then the rest is not so good. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you on what I think is good work on the maintenance facilities in Coney Island and uptown. It really, it's just based on a feeling I have that I think it is going very well. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is something that you need to be aware of. It's called, or in my words anyway, the Freight Carrier Railroad Engineering FRA Revolving Door Cabal. And you need to watch out for these people because they're not entirely honest. And, well, for instance, the assertion that Platform F is essential to providing throughput through the Jamaica station. Well, it's just not so. You take out 2 through tracks and you put in a platform. Is that beneficial for throughput? If you have the inability to service the trains by having them stop, then they can't go through either. But those 2 tracks were connected to the flyover, so you could go back west too. So, and then you see the end of the platform. It's in the midst of a vertical curve there that's somewhat extreme. The whole track is higher. I can't understand that. And it's because they didn't want to change the level of the service.
Please conclude your remarks.
It's an insult. And I got to about 1/3 of the thing. Apologies, but...
Our next speaker is Cassie Refucci, followed by Jack Nuremberg.
Good morning, Chairman Lieber and board members, and welcome, President Davi. My name is Cassie Refucci, and I'm a private citizen of Coney Island, Brooklyn. I would like to see a serious enforcement on mass mandate on all of the public transportation system, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, trains and buses, and also the Staten Island Railway. There is also not enough shuttle bus signs for our train riders, especially on the weekends. Because every time I'm at 36th Street, 4th Avenue on the weekends, it is very not enough communication. I feel there is not enough communication for our train riders, especially at 36th Street, 4th Avenue. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jack Nuremberg, followed by Imam Rawawi Doster.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Jack Nierenberg. I'm also part of Passengers United. Just in the last 2 months, we've had several gun-related incidents and fatal shootings, including those in Sunset Park, Jamaica, Harlem, and just a few days ago at Canal Street, Manhattan. They actually just caught the suspect yesterday, which is great news. But this really proves the point that we do need cops dispersed on the platforms at all stations, especially at smaller stations, local stations, and those in less affluent minority-populated communities. We also need cameras inside the subway cars. And secondly, I meant to put this in the script, I'm sorry about that. With the Long Island Railroad, and we've been advocating for this for years now, especially when mainline shutdowns are more frequent now than they were before, we need shuttle buses on the main line when it's shut down. Every other branch on the Long Island Railroad gets these, except the main line. Why is it, instead, mainline customers are diverted to other branches as well as the N22 and N24 nice buses, which are not reliable? Why is it that when the Babylon line is shut down, customers are not diverted to the N4 and N19, or Long Beach customers to the N15, or Port Washington customers to the N20G or N20H or N23? Every branch except the main line gets these shuttle buses when they're shut down. The main line especially being used by those who do not have access to a car. And not everyone who rides the railroad owns or has access to a car. And the Long Island Railroad is supposed to serve everyone and not just be a secondary transport method for wealthier people. And the fact that they're not doing this now is a serious discrimination problem. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Imam Rawawi Doster, followed by Miriam Fisher.
Hi, good morning. My name is Iman Ramawi Doster, and I'm the Accessoride Campaign Coordinator and Organizer at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. I also use Accessoride. The Accessoride Reform Group, or ARG, strongly supports S 4037 and A 5896, which would amend New York's Public Authorities Law and Transportation laws to extend and expand the scope of on-demand e-hail pilot program. 5 years ago, in response to the strong advocacy of disability rights advocates, the MTA began the on-demand pilot program, allowing 1,200 paratransit users to book a ride when and wherever they needed it. For the first time ever, these riders, including myself, could live our lives the way other New Yorkers do, making travel decisions without having to plan a day in advance or enduring the MTA's least reliable system. The per cost is also far less than standard accessorized service, yet the MTA has claimed it will impose onerous restrictions on the number and distances of on-demand riders. This bill would fund the mandate by guaranteeing state funds to cover costs over last year's pilot costs, and funding would be drawn from the $35 million appropriated in fiscal year 23 state aid to localities' budget for public transportation projects to meet the critical needs of seniors and people with disabilities. This is a win-win across the board, as it allows people with disabilities to continue to use the service that they have described life-changing. And it's at no cost to the MTA. We urge your support for A 5896 and S 4037 to ensure that people with disabilities are entitled to the same on-demand services available to those who use traditional mass transit. And also, there are a number of complaints on Facebook that I think that you guys should look at in the Accessoride complaints groups about physical assault, sexual harassment, and the loss of people getting their rides. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Miriam Fisher, followed by Andy Pollock.
Welcome to Richard Davey to the MTA. I would like to refer to your predecessor, Andy Byford, and quote, "Accessibility is a moral imperative. Request a binding legal commitment and safety to 75% of those stations still not accessible and safe for many, not only people with disabilities, travelers with luggage, bad backs, knees, seniors, parents with strollers, such as the young mother, Malaysia Goodman, who's been referred to previously, who fell on steep steps with her baby carrying a stroller. Accessibility will expand usage for those with few options for transport and support pandemic recovery. Another topic, MTA Board, empty seats on the board, and also the Traffic Mobility Board, connected congestion pricing. No one with a disability currently who uses public transportation and faces its obstacles. Both the governor and mayor have open seats that they could recommend. Fair fares. Program for equity, full support for low-income riders often traveling to work or job hunting can also aid ridership and recovery. Read a recent article by an MTA member, David Jones, who said March 22, wrote 700,000 riders are eligible and still not enrolled. I also read elsewhere about a program in Seattle that many so-called fare feeders needed help in confusing application rules and didn't know about their fair fare program, not more cops and arrests. Still, and they were helped enroll. Still troubled personally by calls.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Andy Pollock, followed by Jason Rabinowitz.
Thank you, Lucille. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, agency presidents. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Andy Pollock from Passengers United. So a couple of things that we need to discuss today. Number one, I want to give my appreciation to Transit District 2 and the NYPD 5th Precinct for quickly making an arrest in connection to the shooting that happened at Canal Street back on Sunday. There was an active 48-hour manhunt. and the suspect will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law come June. Second, I need to bring up a Long Island Railroad issue, and it has a lot to do with New York City Transit. So this morning, there was a signal problem on the 7 at 34th Street Hudson Yards. What I don't understand, why was the Long Island Railroad only cross-honoring between Jamaica and Penn? Why couldn't the Long Island Railroad cross-honor at Woodside? I mean, the signal 7 runs along Woodside. How does that even happen? So that needs to be discussed, how whenever these problems happen again, cross-honoring can be done at Woodside. And lastly, I want to mention something that happened on Monday. Somebody violated the rule of decorum at the Long Island Railroad Metro North committee. Andy Quito's comments were completely unacceptable, and I hope, Mr. Chairman, you will strike down his comments in the June committee book. So that's all I have to say. I didn't expect to speak today, but I'm going to conclude my comments, Lucille. Thank you very much for letting me speak today. Have a great day, and I hope to speak to you all again in June. Take care.
Our next speaker is Jason Rabinowitz, followed by Sonia Gray.
Good morning, MTA Board. I'm joining today to ask you to accelerate the timeline for all-door boarding on all local buses. All we hear from this board is endless rhetoric about fare evasion without any action to actually improve the bus experience for the overwhelming majority of those of us who do pay and rely on the bus to get where we need to go. All-door boarding is a common practice virtually everywhere in the world, and studies show that it does not lead to higher incidents of fare evasion. A recent Vice article by Aaron Gordon actually revealed that MTA knows this and that fare evasion is lower on select bus service routes where MTA today has already had all-door boarding deployed for years without any issue. We can't wait until sometime in late 2023 or probably later, given the sluggish rollout of Omni so far. Fare payment on buses can be improved today with the flip of a switch. The hard work's already done. The Omni readers are already installed on every single bus, at every single door, on every single route. The work is done. All you have to do today is activate them and let people actually tap to pay at all doors on the bus. This will speed up bus loading and get New Yorkers where they need to go faster and more reliably. It may even save the MTA some money as buses operate more reliably on the routes and faster, and there are more opportunities for people to actually pay their fare on board, and everybody wins. It's a simple request. Please don't wait until 2024 just to do something that we can do today. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sonia Gray, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Sonia Gray, and I'm a proud member of TWU Local 100 Career and Salary. I'm also an employee of New York City Transit. Along with my fellow coworkers and members, we have been working without a contract since July 2019. Days before the pandemic closed down our city, we were on the cusp of finalizing our contract. We were at the finish line. There have been no new requests brought to the table by the union. All we have been receiving are excuses from transit, unable to meet due to the pandemic, other unions are in arbitration before you, there's not enough staff available in labor relations to negotiate contracts, on and on and on. As transit has dragged its feet in finalizing our contracts, another contract is right behind this one in a matter of months. As transit has dragged its feet, it has found the opportunity to give wage increases to other employees, non-reps, with a year worth of retro pay. As transit has dragged its feet, the city has reopened and is trying to recover itself. As transit has dragged its feet, inflation has increased by 10%. Our cost of living is beyond the roof, but our standard of living, represented career and salary employees, are below the foundation of the house. And we are sinking further and further into the dirt as we wait for transit to stop dragging its feet and come to the table and negotiate in good faith and finalize our contract. How long must we wait? Not another day, minute, or hour. As our city, state, and country has been getting back to normal, we have not. We are the backbone behind the scenes, working to keep this city moving. We are the feet that is padding feverishly in the water as the MTA tries to regain its footing in the economy. Please acknowledge our efforts and our value and finalize our contract.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by Kara Girl.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Daglian, the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. We're breathing a little easier today since the arrest of the alleged Q-train shooter who senselessly and without provocation took Daniel Enriquez's life. Riding the subway, going to brunch, should not be a death sentence. Thank you to the police for their hard work getting the guy, and thank you to the transit workers who tried valiantly to save their passenger on Sunday. We again appreciate that cameras in the system helped to identify the shooter and get him behind bars. Some Wednesday morning quarterback. Did he pay his fare? Could he have been stopped at the turnstile? We're also concerned that pulling the emergency cord seemed to be the only way that panicked riders knew to alert someone to trouble. Easier and better ways to notify crews and the PD of problems before they start are a must. Riding the subways is part of who we are as New Yorkers, and for many of us, transit is the only way we have to get around. We're mad, we're scared, and we're ticked off, but we're also not going to give up and stay home. It's not who we are or what we do, but we collectively need a new plan and appreciate that mayor, police, and you, Jano, are intently focused on keeping riders safe. That's critical so that more and more people get back on board. There's safety in numbers, but a new shooting every couple of weeks is a real deterrent to increasing ridership. Illegal guns are poisoning our way of life. We need poison control systems and to extract poison to keep them off our streets and out of our trains and buses. Transit crime is a new pandemic, but it isn't unique to New York any more than illegal guns are. Philly, Seattle, Chicago, and LA are facing many of the same issues, and we should put our collective heads together to come up with solutions. Let's convene a national transit safety summit. Let's show solidarity against transit crime and in support of riders. We stand with you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kara Girl, followed by Joe Rappaport.
Good morning. I'm Kara Girl, Research and Communications Associate at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. As transit riders, many of us start and end our trips as pedestrians. But now, with the MTA Bike Access Bill signed by Governor Hochul, we're excited to officially welcome bicycle riders to our family. PCAC's legislative mandate now includes recommending ways for the MTA to improve bike and pedestrian access to its stations and facilities, and we look forward to welcoming 3 new PCAC members with expertise in this area. We're gearing up to offer our first set of recommendations to inform the MTA's strategic access plan for bikes and pedestrians. Now, during our climate crisis, is the time to make sure that riders can get to transit without access to a car. And as the MTA grapples with attracting back riders, opening new paths, bike and pedestrian paths, to get to stations will help. Micromobility is the future, and we're encouraged by your commitment to studying ways to make it work for transit riders. The first and last mile study underway for commuter rail is great. Secure bike parking, fare integration, and clearly communicating the rules will be key system-wide, while of course, making sure riders bike safely and watch for pedestrians. While these plans are in the works, we have a challenge for you. Instead of getting on the train here at Bowling Green later, we encourage those of you who are able to try riding a city bike to Wall Street or Fulton Street before getting back on transit. It's a scary and challenging ride. I myself have recently started city biking to the subway, and it's shown me countless ways where connectivity must be improved between modes. Improving bike access to transit is a natural extension of the work you're already doing with City DOT on busways and bus lanes. Prioritizing mobility means making sure that all riders can get where they need to go without a car. Improving first and last mile connections to transit will require coordination and communication with our partners, city and state DOTs, city bike and other bike and scooter share companies, and local municipalities, among others. We're confident that all stakeholders can work together. The future of our city, region, and planet depend on it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joe Rappaport, followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. This has been a really tough time. Yesterday in Texas, Sunday on the Q, before that in Buffalo and at 36th Street and on. You'll find, Mr. Davey, that our groups often disagree with how the MTA runs the system and about its priorities. But I think this is an appropriate time to acknowledge and thank all of you for the work you do here, and especially for the work that everyone on the ground and underground does to keep the subway, bus, and paratransit systems going. One of the things that can get us through times like this is to make small changes that make life better, maybe not for everyone, but small changes that will make a big difference for some people. My colleagues today have talked about two things that are simple and would make a big difference for some riders. One is to get rid of the antiquated, ridiculous process by which you declare people eligible for Access-a-Ride. As Kara Leibowitz testified, on Long Island, in Washington, D.C., and across the nation and across the state, remote evaluation is standard. There's this thing called the internet you can use. But here, the MTA relies on an expensive in-person system designed to make it harder to get approved. It's sort of like those voter suppression laws. This is not a medical evaluation, folks. One of the evaluators at one site lectured the mother of a BCID board member about the evils of vaccination during her evaluation, believe it or not. The other simple, low-cost thing you can do is to expand your on-demand Access-a-Ride program to give it a real test. We've been coming here for 4 years talking about this life-changing program. It's time to select people randomly to see the real cost of the program without limits, limits that none of your subway and bus riders must adhere to, I would add. Thank you very much.
Our final speaker is Jason Anthony.
Good morning, for MTA Board. Jason Anthony from Amazon Labor Union. I love when everybody is paying attention to my speeches, especially to incoming New York City Transit President Richard Davey, where I have a nickname for him now, that is Mr. Boston, that unfortunately, during his opening remarks on Monday, he referenced Boston more than a handful of times. I have a message for you, Richard. You're not in Boston. Come on. You're in New York. And unfortunately, some of our public speakers this morning didn't mention your name not even once in a good way. And here's why. Because all of us in the transit community will miss a single person that is not here with us. And that person is Andy Byford. Andy Byford, during his tenure here in New York, did something good for all of us, independently for the inaccessible, did so many good things that you don't have an idea. It's up to you to be in good terms, not only with the transit community, with transit workers. Because transit workers move the city. If they raise red flags, they shut it down. It's up to you to be in good terms with everybody.
Thank you for your
comment. And I'll see everybody next month.
Thank you. Chair Lieber, that now concludes public comment.
I thank you, Lucille, and thank you to all the public speakers who've raised a range of really, really important issues. We don't say it enough, but we actually benefit from and appreciate the input that we receive, even if it is, frequently in the form of criticism or a heads up about something we need to do better. So it is part of our, it's not just part of our ritual, it's part of our information process. I need to acknowledge, as some of the speakers did, that this is the first board meeting where we have the benefit of New York City Transit President Richard Davey's participation, Rich has gotten off to a flying start, and we're thrilled that he has joined us. Welcome, Rich. Look, this has been another incredibly difficult week for New York following the horrific shooting on the Q train. A great New Yorker, Daniel Enriquez, lost his life in a senseless and cold-blooded act of violence. It's murder. Let's call it what it is. Thankfully, the New York NYPD has arrested the killer. I have to say, when I first saw the images that the MTA cameras had captured, I was worried that how the police were going to find this guy. He had a hoodie on, he had a mask on. It was hard to identify his face. Then I said to myself, it's the NYPD, one of the greatest investigative forces in the world. They'll get him. And they did, fast. I want to thank the police commissioner and the NYPD for their extraordinary work tracking him down, and of course, Mayor Adams for his steadfast commitment to the safety of the subway system. So I'll say it again, on behalf of everybody here at the MTA who works here, our workforce, and our riders most of all, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Adams, and thank you, NYPD. I hope the news of the arrest brings some solace to the family of Mr. Enriquez. Our thoughts are with them and with all New Yorkers who are feeling terrified in the wake of this incident. Let's not sugarcoat it. People are scared. But our thoughts are also with everyone all over the country, in Texas, in Buffalo, and too many other places who are struggling with this insane epidemic of gun violence. But we need to focus, as the mayor has said again and again, on making sure that we don't just catch people after the fact of crime. We need to prevent crime before it occurs. That's why I'm appreciative of the mayor's omnipresent strategy. They're putting police officers, this was something that this board asked for and that I asked for of the NYPD some time ago. They're putting police officers in the subway system in the locations where our riders are vulnerable and where they feel vulnerable, on trains, on platforms, and throughout stations, with the goal of interdicting crime, of stopping the bad guys before bad things happen. Because we cannot surrender. We cannot surrender. We cannot afford to lose New York's public space, especially our subways. Too many people rely on transit to work, to go to school, to live their lives. And at bottom, this is an equity issue. It's about equity. For so many New Yorkers, the transit system is the only way to get around. Equity, fairness, dictates that we cannot let our system fail, to become unusable, unavailable, or unreliable. And in a minute, I'm going to walk you through a few maps that illustrate just how important the subways in the wake of COVID remain, especially to working New Yorkers. First, the big picture. After an Omicron dip, riders continue to come back. On May 18th, we carried 3.6 million riders on the subways. That's the first time we hit 3.6 million since March of 2020. That number is more than the pre-COVID ridership of the top 7 or 8 systems in the United States after New York: Washington Metro, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Atlanta, LA, Miami, plus the Port Authority's PATH system. All put together, pre-COVID, their ridership doesn't match what we have right now. Give you a sense of the scale. The day before that record subway ridership, Long Island Railroad and Metro North served more than 182,000 passengers and 162,000 passengers, respectively. Also records. And we had our best week overall last week. Across all modes, the second week in a row that we'd hit that new high point. Think about it. On an average weekday, just 38% of Manhattan office workers are in the office, but transit is at 60% of pre-COVID ridership. There are a lot of people riding who aren't going to sit in swivel chairs in Manhattan skyscrapers, who are riding the system because they're going to school, because they're doing essential work in the boroughs, because they're moving around and living their lives. That is a hopeful sign for the recovery of our system, that we're not only dependent on the Manhattan office worker. But it's worth looking more closely at subway ridership because we want to have a clear picture of who it is that we are serving. The operations planning team at New York City Transit has been analyzing estimated entries by station. What we see is that in some parts of the system are still lagging. And this is the image of those stations. The stations that are marked in red have less than 55% of the entries that they received pre-COVID. You'll notice where they're concentrated. System-wide, what we're missing are trips to and from the central business district and within the central business district. Some of what's missing are tourists. I think those are coming back. But a lot of it is office workers, both the trips they make commuting to work, but also the rides that they take as they move around the city to go to meetings, to make sales calls, and all that normal stuff that existed pre-COVID. You can also see clearly how our satellite business districts in downtown Brooklyn and in Long Island City are also in red. A lot of people who used to work in those areas are also not commuting as frequently as they used to. Now compare this map to another one, which shows the stations where ridership is much closer to what it was pre-COVID. These are places where essential workers, working class New Yorkers by and large, where that community lives. Customers who in many cases have been riding with us through the pandemic because they were essential, because their work was needed to keep New York alive through the pandemic, who have to work in person today, people who have been loyal and who have been relying on us right through. In some of those neighborhoods, transit ridership is actually as high as 80% of pre-COVID levels. And that's represented here by the green dots. That's well above the 60% blended threshold that we're at system-wide. You can see a concentration of green in certain lines. It's the 2, 5, and 6 lines in the East Bronx, in the Central and East Bronx. In Central Brooklyn, you see some of the stations on the A and the L. In Ozone Park and Woodside, on the JZ and the AC. In South Brooklyn, on the NR, F, and the B and the Q. And in Queens, there's a lot of green in Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, Corona area along the 7, an area we all know is heavily populated by immigrants and working class New Yorkers. Bottom line, what this exercise of mapping ridership is showing us is that there are many communities, some with long commutes far from the central business district, who have remained at 70 or 80%, sometimes even 90% of pre-COVID. They also happen to be, as I say, the less affluent areas of our city. And so our ability to keep providing full service, reliable service, is a fundamental equity issue. We can't let them down. Okay, so what we're trying to do here in these new format board meetings is to give you the big picture, presentations that really go to the major important topics. But I also just want to acknowledge that there's a great deal of important work and information that gets conveyed at our Monday committee meetings. And just to recap what happened 2 days ago, you heard from Rich in his first presentation of the Transit Committee. So much optimism, so much vision, so much aggressive planning for how to take on the challenging issues of the moment. You heard from Judy McLean, the Chief of Operations Planning at Transit, about everything that's being done to make sure the Bronx bus redesign, which is being effectuated in just a month, to make everything that's being done to make sure that Bronx bus redesign is a success. So for folks who are concerned about what we're doing to make bus service better, Staten Island has redesigned and it's speeded travel. The Bronx, we've got everybody on board, and now we're putting it into effect. It's going to we hope and expect that it will create a much better bus system, and working hard on Queens. Kathy Rinaldi on Monday discussed Grand Central service that's going to be put into effect when East Side Access comes online by the end of this year. And we're going to release those new schedules soon. And in the Capital Committee, after lunch, where we still get a full quorum of board members, we heard how East Side Access continues its relentless push to be finished by the end of this year, as I have promised since 2018, but also about how Third Track learned from the mistakes of East Side Access and used those lessons to become an below budget and on-time project that succeeded in working with the Long Island communities where so much of that construction was going on, that we can learn from the past. So a lot of work got accomplished on Monday, and I just want to acknowledge that. And most importantly, Andrew, you want to be acknowledged in the middle of my remarks, please.
No. Because you had the map on a moment ago, I just want to say how illuminating that map is, but what it doesn't reflect is how evening and weekend ridership has continued to rebound even stronger when people have the choice of whether they want to go out and do things. They're not commuting to work, but they're going out to do all of the things New York has to offer. And nights and weekends, and especially weekends, the trains are really crowded. So that's a sign that people are returning when they want to return.
Amen. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Most important, in the Finance Committee on Monday, you heard from Kevin Willens describing our challenging fiscal situation. I've been talking about this. It's not news to this board. I've been talking about this for a great deal, for a long time. But the picture is now becoming even clearer as the return to work pattern emerges. New projections are being prepared and will be used to finalize the July financial plan. But for several months, I've been talking to people in Albany, making the point that we are an essential service and we need Albany to begin developing the strategies to close the MTA's looming budget deficit. We all know by now, after 2+ years of COVID, that the MTA, and I know I'm being repetitive, but I'm going to keep on it, we are an essential service like police, fire, and sanitation, and our indispensable system must be funded in a way that recognizes this fact. Call me a broken record. I'm still going to keep going on it. We have to find a solution. Right now, this board has limited options to deal with the budget shortfall, and they're only tools that nobody wants us to exercise. If we cut service, raise fares, or initiate layoffs, it is those less affluent, working New Yorkers who depend on us the most who are going to suffer, the people who can't afford a $60 Uber. Think back to the maps that I just showed you. Okay. The agenda for today. We have 2 special presentations. I'm very proud of the way we have developed these presentations as a feature of this board meeting. Lizette Camillo is going to give us an update on the critical work that we're doing to recruit and retain staff. I think folks on the board recall that at the outset of my time here, I highlighted the fact that the transformation had not left us in good shape as far as staff, both in numbers, because we had that hiring freeze and we'd had such tremendous attrition, but also in terms of the process and the time it was taking to recruit and hire staff. So Lizette, who's been doing amazing work on that front, is going to talk about that. And then Rich and Dorian Statham are going to describe the next bus redesign project, which is underway in Queens. I just want to make sure we've talked about the process and how we changed the rules, and we took another crack at this after the first version a few years ago got bad reviews. But I really want folks to understand what the substance of this is. So those are the two presentations for today. And with that, let me turn it over to Lizette.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. As Chair Lieber presented in March, reviving talent and culture is one of the MTA's strategic priorities for this year. And I'm here to report on the progress we've made addressing some of the human resources issues that we've been experiencing. But before I talk about the progress we've made, I wanted to spend some time describing where we were last year and how we got there. I think it's important. So the HR issues that you've heard about, the difficulties in hiring up and staffing up quickly, is a result of what I'm calling a perfect storm of events. And some of the issues that contributing, as the chair mentioned, the hiring freeze first in 2018 and then again in 2019 due to COVID, created a slow and steady increase in gaps in the people resources across the entire agency without an ability to replenish or close that or ability to hire. Then what I'm calling the transformation tornado, though it was intended to improve the personnel structure within the agency, the work wasn't completed. And I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain about what that means for us day to day. So the focus really was on lifting and shifting the people to their new agency, but the tedious task of actually ensuring that the organizational infrastructure of the organization to be cleaned up, that didn't happen. And so again, just as an example, one way that shows up post-consolidation after people were moved, there are people working side by side with each other, performing the same work, possibly with different titles, with different salaries, doing the same things. That work wasn't cleaned up. Another issue that we are grappling with, post-consolidation, policies weren't consolidated across the agency, so we still have different groups doing different things for the same purposes, particularly within HR. Data was still housed in different agencies and used in particularly different ways. There was no visibility into some of our practices centrally, and you can't manage what you can't measure, and that was a challenge. The shift happened so quickly that in some areas, functions were left without a home. Some things that were performed day to day within agencies, post-consolidation, people moved, but all of the tasks didn't follow. Some of us were caught a little bit flat-footed there. So all of these things organizationally paint a really difficult picture for us. So while all of this is happening, then the MTA had to do a hairpin turn to quickly take advantage of the much needed cash infusion, but to hire up almost, instantly, right? During an incredibly hot employment market. So all of these things happening together really show how challenging an environment it's been to get what we need to do quickly. And I have to be honest, it's a bit messy, but we're working through it. We've been hard at work trying to change the course, and while there's a lot of work left to be done, the last 6 months and the work we've done during this time gives me a lot of confidence that we're really beginning to turn the tide here. And a couple of things to highlight. I can spend 2 hours talking about all the work that's happening, but a couple of things to highlight is, one, a very under-resourced talent acquisition team got an infusion of additional recruiters to help have more hands, more bodies, do the work of trying to get more people on staff quickly. Data. We have been laser focused on using data to help us manage our hiring. One of the items that I'm going to highlight for you is a rollout of our people movement dashboard. So one of the first things that any HR management team does is to use their data to assess comprehensively basic data points such as attrition, hire rates, separations. And the good news is that at each agency, that everyone was using the same system, PeopleSoft. But the bad news was that everyone was using it differently. And so pulling up centralized data reports on how we're doing as an agency, it just was impossible. So one of the first initiatives we did was to have the Strategic Initiatives Group work with the People Group to develop and build out a people movement dashboard. And this tool allows us to centrally track separations and additional data points about our workforce, like entries and exits. And so these data points allow us to compare across agencies and proactively pursue hiring practices to meet goals. And I'm going to see, there we go. So this is an example of what our dashboard looks like. This is one of the screens that we use. And what we're focusing on here is the hiring rate. So at a management level, the KPI that we're tracking is the ratio of exits, employee exits, to entries. And our goal is to hire more people than we're losing. But as you can see, in early 2021, the agency was losing a lot more people, many more people than it was hiring. And so, for example, in January, we lost 434 people, mostly through retirements, compared to the only hiring 72. So that inversion clearly is not workable for an agency that provides essential services. But thankfully, once the hiring freeze was lifted and the spigot was open, that tide began to turn about late July 2021. And since then, through an all-hands-on-deck effort, not only have we turned the tide on hiring more people than we lose, as you can see, we're on an upward trajectory. And an example of this on a micro level, given the ramp up of the staffing necessary to support East Side Access, we were a bit concerned about the negative index at the Long Island Railroad this year, which is, comparing to what the agency was doing overall. But things really have turned around under President Rinaldi's leadership, and now we're hiring 3 times as many people as we're losing. So we're on track. So in addition to data, we're focusing on efficiencies in the hiring process. Months can go by between when a position is posted and when they're finally filled. And as you can imagine, most of the talent is not going to wait around in a hot job market for many months. So we have a cross-disciplinary initiative underway to systematically look at how we reduce each step in the process. And we've made a lot of progress getting positions filled, but again, more work is happening, more work needs to be done. But one initiative that we've gotten underway is mass hiring events that I would like to highlight. So the goal with these events is to get everybody in the room together at the same time, recruiters, hiring managers, the talent, all in the same room, streamline the process or even front load the process so that qualified applicants get interviewed on the spot and hopefully even get an offer on the spot. And maybe in the private sector, this is something that happens frequently, but for us, this is a big deal. It's a new initiative. So last month, we organized an IT expo where we did, again, all of the legwork up front. It was a really good partnership between IT and HR. Everything, was done on the front end. We had a great turnout at the event. We had 4,000 people apply. We had 95 people be interviewed, and we selected 47 candidates during that one event. The big win here was really kicking the tires on our process, seeing where we can make grand efficiencies and making decisions up front. So that was a very successful initiative, which we're hoping to replicate. And actually for the Long Island Railroad, we have one coming up on June 14th, focusing on operating titles like electrician, radio technician, and machinists, all of the difficult to fill skilled crafts. And we're working very closely with elected officials and our partners in labor to really get the word out so that we can start filling these vacancies. So one of the great things that our People Movement dashboard made very clear to us is that we really have to look at our bench to develop our bench. The majority of our employees have more than 10 years of experience, and the majority of the employees who separated from the agency retire. So we really do have to focus on building our next generation of public servants here at the MTA. And so these should really be folks that really understand the MTA, take the subway, the buses, the commuter rail, and understand that the MTA is a linchpin part of New York City. And there is no better place to partner with than with CUNY. CUNY is a great institution to recruit from. It produces smart and diverse pool of potential employees with a broad variety of disciplines. I mean, they have a widely successful and top-tier engineering school at City College, Baruch's Zicklin School of Business, a broad array of disciplines, and the MTA needs all of those disciplines. So we're partnering together to initiate a paid internship program for this year for 125 college and grad students starting in July to build on that need in the years ahead. And it's not only a great institution for future leaders. Every day, CUNY grads contribute to the MTA. I just wanted to call out a few of our staff members who've graduated from CUNY. Alison DeSereno, lead on congestion pricing, got her PhD at CUNY. Shani Ferreira, Chair, Senior Advisor for Communication and Policy, went to Baruch, my own deputy. Rosita Ibrick, MPA from Baruch. Carolyn Ortega, Chief Product Officer in IT, got her PhD at the Graduate Center. Monica DaCosta, Chief Officer of Operations at Transit, got her MPA. So every day, CUNY grads contribute to the MTA to get to where it needs to go. We need more of that talent here. So moving on to focusing now on our internal, current employees. We talked a little bit about what we're doing to attract new employees, turning it inward a little bit. We're looking at our current employees, and as the chair mentioned, providing feedback to employees is a tool to increase employee engagement. And we're working to build that culture here at the MTA. We instituted the first all-agency centralized performance management program for non-represented staff. And previous to that, each agency did its own thing or did nothing. So this is really a move that is really about changing the culture and instilling in this institution this practice of feedback, performance feedback. And just to give you a bit of a flavor of how successful we've been, in 2019, participation in a performance management program previously was as low as 40%. And this year, for 2022, we've got an 88% compliance rate. So as you can see, we really are pushing everyone to adopt this, and we want to make it part of our culture. So, not only do these evaluations help us align staff goals with MTA-wide corporate goals that were presented to the board in March, but evaluations are also important to make staff feel more connected to the work and to the institution. So especially during the COVID era, when we were all separated and we were all working remotely, it's an opportunity to reestablish a sense of cohesiveness and mission. And so we, as you can see, have made a lot of progress there. So I've given a few snippets of some of the challenges we're dealing with, how we're trying and working together to overcome them. But as I mentioned a few times before, the work, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. We are still looking at the HR process to continue to further streamlining and making it more efficient. We are looking at adding new tools like an applicant tracking system, and upgrading some of our other data programs. Another initiative that we have under consideration is a plan to offer some form of telework for non-represented staff whose job functions can be performed remotely. This initiative would go part and parcel with performance management. And also, working with our budget constraints, within our budget constraints, we're looking at reviewing our compensation systems and policies, basically finishing the work of transformation. And I hope to be back to provide the board with further updates on the work that we're doing. But that's the snapshot of what's been going on.
Questions and comments, Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones.
Okay. One thing I didn't hear about, we've done polling for the last 15 years of low-income New Yorkers, and one of the big support areas is on career and technical education in our high schools and junior high schools. The question of either short-term or long-term, using it as a major recruitment device of young people coming out of high school who have gone through CTE programs, who don't need a college degree, basically, to join the workforce, but actually setting up a marriage that is discussed between David Banks, the new chancellor, and MTA, of creating course-specific issues for young people coming out who may want to go on to something but need an immediate job prospect as they get out of high school. So I would strongly suggest that we begin that process now, because you have such a workforce demand here.
Sure. I can't agree with you more. There are already in existence relationships with some of the technical high schools in the city. We have a very long-standing relationship with Transit Tech, but I agree with you. This is an area where we can certainly grow, and it's certainly one of the on the to-do list to do work to expand programs like that, to have it be a feeder pool for some of our skilled trades.
So just in case, I know, you probably know this, but Transit Tech is a school that specifically teaches transit technology education. They have a retired subway car out there. They do a lot of training for mechanical and electrical expertise. You got a lot of kids who are already passionate about our work. I went out there a couple weeks ago. Secretary Buttigieg was out there. It's a really, really successful program. We hire, 50 to 100. I think we hire somewhere between 50 and 100 kids out of there on a regular basis. So, but we can grow. We can grow to other schools as well. I think that those relationships are established and underway, but we'll try to grow them. Elizabeth Villette.
Thank you. Equity and inclusion is a strategic imperative in a city as diverse as New York City. So if you could possibly, next report, outline what we're doing to attract and retain folks from diverse backgrounds.
Happy to.
Lizette, thank you. I have two questions. You mentioned transformation, that it was a little messy. Can you just expand on that and what needs to get done?
I would say that the aftermath was messy, not that the transformation was messy necessarily. I think it was not, the work wasn't finished, and we're undertaking that initiative now. So like I mentioned, looking at our organizational structure, making sure that titles are, consistent across the board. That type of work needs to continue.
Okay. And then number two, how many vacancies do we have?
I don't have the exact number with me. I can certainly circle back.
Okay.
Vinny Tessitore. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have another question here?
I just remember the last time it was like 4,300 or 4,400 vacancies. So if you can get me that number. Thank you.
Jenna.
Mr. Tessitore, followed by Commissioner Cortez-Vasquez.
So, that's a good presentation. I certainly can appreciate it. It makes a lot of sense. I would just like to add a little, from a labor sense, yeah? Prior to the pandemic, people were banging down doors for a job at the MTA. Being an essential worker across the state, I think, was a job that everyone would really want to attain and achieve. It's changed significantly, obviously, and being an essential worker today, certainly at the MTA, is not as attractive, right? So we certainly have to make it more attractive. The concern, and I think what we have to think about moving forward, is coming from a time when everybody wanted a job here has now turned into a time where people are calling and asking about early retirement options, resignations. We're struggling to get people, all of those jobs that you listed on that job fair site, most of those jobs are entry-level jobs that require promotion, and we don't retain them because they don't promote, right? So I think we have to really be mindful that we keep the incentives up for people. I've attended a few job fairs recently on Long Island, and people come to you and they confront you and they say, so how many days a week? 3 days? Could we work 3 days a week and then 2 at home? No, this is an essential worker job. We got to be here every day and plus, because Jano needs you here sometimes 6 days. So whatever it may be, joke. But the bottom line, all I'm trying to say is we as a board have to be mindful to keep the job attractive. And I know this sounds like a bargaining plug, but it's not. It's just don't forget that, because you know, I'm concerned as a person that's been on the job a long time. I'm concerned about the newer people and the mindset. It's not the same. It's a different culture. So we have to bring back the fact that this is not a job to work as an essential worker at the MTA. It's a career. It's a life. You give up a lot, and your family gives up a lot, and we have to give back the appreciation to the workforce.
Very much appreciate your comment, and I just want to acknowledge that you have made yourself part of our efforts to recruit workers in the Long Island Railroad, and we appreciate that. There is a positive sign. I want to give Kathy Rinaldi another shout out that we have really accelerated hiring in anticipation of the East Side Access service opening, which is going to grow workforce. Obviously, we need a whole lot of new workers in a lot of different categories. But under Kathy, that has really picked up pace, and we've turned a situation which is, as Lizette said, negative into one which is very positive. So I think there is cause for for hope. Commissioner Cortez Vasquez.
Thank you, Lizette. Great presentation. In a future report, it would be helpful to talk about the pathways for management levels and for equity and inclusion at the management level, and what kind of pathway, or if there are any programs for that. So that would be very helpful.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Andrew Alpert.
Yes, can you just say a little more about how the change in vesting for tiers 5 and 6 will affect overall workforce levels?
So the changes have certainly made it more attractive to remain and come into the organization, since now you vest earlier than had previously been done. And I think that was something that was very well received by the staff.
How much earlier, just out of curiosity?
I believe it's 5 years.
5 years?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brinkman.
Yes, I was just curious, how do the salaries we offer compare to the private sector? I noticed you were looking for, well, I come from a construction background, so I noticed you're looking for plumbers, you're looking for electricians. So are you competitive with the outside world, with construction in New York in general, as far as, those building trades are concerned?
Generally, as an agency, we are not as competitive, and mostly on the non-rep side. On the represented side, I think, because everything is negotiated, and the represented side tends to fare a little better, or a lot better, than the non-represented side in terms of market comparables.
If I may, Mr. Brinkman,
Yes, sir.
the plus is we have strong benefits, broadly speaking. We have a pension system, which certainly private sector, not widely available these days. And we have strong health and other benefits.
Okay, I should have rephrased that. I should have meant the total package, total compensation package.
That is
compared
where
to
we're
the-
strong, and historically on the non-rep side, non-represented workers, the cash compensation side is not as strong as private sector market. But we are, in fairness, one of the things that Lizette is doing is trying to really reevaluate where we stand in that picture. So that is an ongoing effort that Lizette is undertaking.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
Ready to go on to our second presentation? I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, regarding what attracts someone to a job. Yeah, we have, I defend all our jobs, say these are good jobs. We like them a lot. But as far as wages and benefits, believe me, the construction industry has very good pension benefits, the union side, and very good health and welfare benefits. That's not where our advantage is regarding recruitment. Our advantage in recruitment is you don't get laid off 6 months, 8 months, a year. So that's the sort of thing that makes us more of a career. Now, two, it's like the business cycle. Now the demand for labor is very high, and all the really great people seek out the money. Well, when the demand for labor is much lower, then the opposite happens. So we got to position ourselves in the sweet spot for each institution. Now, my concern, which was my concern with the transformation, and I feel like this is a little bit of a Groundhog Day conversation we're having about recruiting, by the way. This goes over and over again, but the transformation took all of that dynamic from the agencies and put it in your lap at the mothership. So this is my concern, is that as time goes on, the managers here are less capable of reacting to their very dynamic human resource needs. And it's time to put an end to the transformation and regress some of that power to the local agencies so that these highly competent professionals you hire to run each agency are able to react to their specific needs.
So our model, for particularly on the recruitment side, have the recruiters and the professionals that are actually doing the recruiting and the hiring embedded and co-located within their agency. So that level of ability to pivot and be flexible to support their clients, you know, it's been built into this current model. But you know, we understand your perspective.
Thank you, everybody, for hearing us out on something which is a little technical, not maybe as front of mind for all of the riders, but is so important. We're an organization of, depending on what year, 65 to 70,000 people, and we really need to be making sure that our workforce, which is the MTA, let's not get it wrong, is constantly a focal point, making sure we have provide a top-tier opportunity and that we're an employer of choice. So that's what we're doing. I just want to acknowledge again what an amazing job Lizette Camillo has done since she came to us after her successful career as the Commissioner of DCAS in the City of New York. Thank you, Lizette. At this point, I'm passing it over to Rich to lead the Queens Bus redesign presentation. Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you can tell me just for a moment, I also want to acknowledge and thank the public speakers today for welcoming me, giving me a nickname. But in all seriousness, also wanted to acknowledge that I look forward to working with the accessibility community and our paratransit customers as well. You'll be hearing a lot more from me, and Jason, I hope I earn a better nickname than Mr. Boston in my tenure here. Moving on to the bus redesign, you know, we've used the phrase bus redesign, but I actually think it's a modernization. As I understand it, we haven't really looked at the Queens service in such a comprehensive way in maybe 50 to 70 years. Dorian will have some history on that to share. You know, with change always comes controversy. You know, for every bus stop, I've said in other cities, that there's always a constituent who has a concern if we're changing it or closing it, and we're very cognizant of that. We've been out listening to our customers. You'll hear from Dorian about the process, and we've also been listening to our bus operators too. You know, these are the folks that are actually, you know, in the trenches, really, you know, obviously driving our service, and we'll know what right-hand turn or left-hand turn might be less safe or unsafe, as an example. So that internal feedback has also, I think, really helped us. I do want to thank Judy McLean, her team, Dorian, who represents a number of folks who have been working hard on this. Thank you very much. And I would lastly say, you know, this is part of a bigger bus strategy that we have, right? So our redesign or our modernization, whether it's in the Bronx, Queens, and hopefully Brooklyn, in, you know, coming soon, is part of an overall strategy. And so that's working with the mayor and the city. You know, the mayor's outlined a really ambitious 150 miles of new bus lanes in the next 4 years. That is super exciting. We're going to support him and the team at the city DOT to implement that. And our able enforcement cameras. I was on a bus over the weekend, the 42. Frank saw me take a number of pictures. There's an ice cream truck. There's private buses. There's a litany of obstacles in the way of our bus lanes, which is frustrating, certainly for me as a customer. Our operator, by the way, did wonders, you know, dodging all of those on road. So we've got a lot of work to do beyond the redesign. I just wanted to make sure that this board knew and the public knew that the redesigns are just a piece of our overall strategy to improve bus. So with that, Dorian, please.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'll jump right into this. So why are we redesigning the bus network in Queens? Queens has more bus routes, more bus riders than any other borough with over 115 routes and over 800,000 daily riders. That actually just Queens by itself would be the third highest in ridership, only after LA and Chicago. The Queens bus network, as Rich has said, has not really changed in a long time, but Queens, as we know, as a borough, has been growing and changing during this time. As an MTA, we've made minor incremental changes, but really never looked at the entire network holistically before. So as Queens has grown, congestion has gotten worse. During that time, our ridership has been decreasing, but also our service reliability and our speeds have also been decreasing during this time. So just to recap the process of the redesign, so we launched this project back in April of 2019. Immediately after that, we published an existing conditions report, which was a detailed analysis of all the existing service that was in the borough in terms of performance and other features. Then we published a draft plan at the very end of 2019. That was the first draft plan, and then we did about 2.5 months of outreach immediately after that before we had to pause the project because of COVID. But during that 2.5 months, we received an unprecedented amount of feedback, over 11,000 comments. And then the good thing about the pause for COVID, we had the 18 months for the team to really analyze all those comments, and we actually came up with a new draft plan that was really responding to the customer feedback that we did receive. We released that new draft plan at the end of March, and since then we've been doing workshops and public engagement with the community on that new draft plan. So when we first started this project, we asked our customers, we had open houses throughout the borough of Queens, but we also had a survey. We asked our customers what was important to them. They had 4 answers. They wanted reliable service. They wanted the bus to show up when it was supposed to. They wanted faster travel. They wanted the bus to show up quickly, but once on the bus, they want to get to their destinations as fast as possible. They want better connections within Queens, but also to neighboring boroughs. And they also wanted a system that was easy for them to use and understand. The map on the right is the new proposed network. There are 4 route types that we're proposing. 3 of these are existing. We have local routes that are connecting local neighborhoods with much closer stop spacing. We have limited routes which are serving high demand corridors with more frequent service. We have SBS or crosstown routes that are connecting key destinations across longer distances with fewer stops. And then the brand new service we're proposing here are rush routes which connect from the outer borough to get customers to the subway faster. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. So the strategies we're using to improve the bus network here in Queens, these are not different strategies than we used in the Bronx, but also in Staten Island for the express bus redesign in 2018. We are simplifying the network to make our routes more direct and straight. We are expanding connections. This is connections not only to Long Island Railroad in Queens here, but also looking at ADA accessible stations, whether that's current or future proposed ADA accessible stations. We're also looking at improving frequency on our key corridors, and these are high ridership corridors. There's a map later that I will discuss about this. We are also looking at improving bus stop spacing, which Rich talked about earlier. And then last, we are continuing to work with our partners at New York City Department of Transportation to improve bus priority, so bus lanes and other treatments to speed up our buses and improve service reliability. So just to talk about each of these strategies in a little bit more detail. So for simplifying routes to make them more direct, the example here is the Q23, which is serving 108th Street. Currently on the north and south terminal of the route is very meandering. So with this proposal, we are straightening the route along 108th Street, providing a more direct connection from East Elmhurst all the way down to Kew Gardens. We're also extending the route along Union Turnpike to provide a better connection to Fresh Meadows. So for better connections, this example is a brand new route. This is the Q51. This route will connect Southeast Queens all the way over to East New York and in Brooklyn, where the Gateway Center is. So currently, if someone wanted to go from Cambria Heights all the way over to East New York, they would have to go to Jamaica to transfer. So this would be a brand new route that really is filling a gap in the network. On Linden Boulevard, we don't have consistent service now. So this would be a very important east-west connection through Southeast Queens over to Brooklyn. And this is one of the 19 interborough routes that we're proposing in this Queens plan. Also looking at improving frequency, the map you see on the right is the red routes are our limited routes, the blue routes are our crosstown routes. What we're proposing here is an all-day frequent network. So every route that you see there would have service every 10 minutes or better from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays. So a customer walks outside at any time during that time, they know to expect the bus to show up within 10 minutes or better. So better bus stop spacing, as Rich mentioned, New York City has some of the closest bus stops in the world. With this proposal, we plan to increase the distance between local stops to be more in line with the global standards and more in line with the Bronx redesign plan. Every bus stop we remove saves about 20 seconds on average for our customers. This can translate to noticeable travel time savings over the entire course of the route. In the example here with the Q84, just removing bus stops will actually speed up the route. So someone going from the very end from Cambria Heights to Jamaica would save about 9 minutes each way just from bus stop removals. Whenever we do analyze bus stops, we make sure we're maintaining the bus stops that are heavy ridership, any that are providing key connections or transfer opportunities, but also any that are serving important community facilities such as schools, but also healthcare facilities. And then the last slide here is just looking at more detail from our relationship with DOT. We have identified 5 current bus priority projects that DOT is working on, but also there are 24 primary study corridors that they're continuing to look at to support the redesign, and there are about 25 secondary corridors. Downtown Jamaica and downtown Flushing are very special zones that they're looking at lots of street improvements there, considering also the busways that they just implemented in the last few years, but also looking at other treatments because there's a huge concentration of buses that are moving through there and lots of congestion, so anything to help will have impact on several routes. And then just the last slide here is how our customers can provide feedback. We started this outreach at the end of March. We've been doing virtual workshops in Queens. There's 14 scheduled, 1 for each community district. We've done 11 of those. We had Community District 11 last night. Community District 12 is on Thursday, and there are 2 more next week. So that's one opportunity. If customers show up, they can actually speak directly to our bus planners if they have concerns about the proposal. And then also we have Remix, which is a web-based interactive tool where customers can actually look at their routes, look at their stops, and add comments directly onto the route. It's location-based, so it helps the customer really understand the proposals. And then lastly, we have a very comprehensive website that has all the information that I've covered in today's presentation, but there are also other resources there, such as their detailed route profiles. There's also a comment portal where customers can also leave detailed information and give us additional feedback on this new Queens Bus draft plan. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to invite questions and comments. Mr. Glucksman at the ready.
Very interesting presentation. Queens is made up of a bunch of legacy bus companies that all got merged into MTA Bus. So are those routes, with your redesign, are any of those routes, the former private companies, being integrated with the current TA routes that they have?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason for a lot of the route redundancy, because they were the private companies that were offering different services that were competing with each other. And when all those companies were formed together, they created MTA Bus Company, which is operating half the service in Queens, and New York City Transit is operating the other half. But all of those routes are being studied for this redesign. That's why it's 115 of them.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Albert.
Yes, thank you very much for this. You, of course, know that we are at the PCAC and Transit Riders Council and Long Island Railroad Commuter Council are looking to put more people on the commuter rails within the boroughs as another means of getting around the city and utilizing the MTA's fabulous facilities. So I'm wondering if some of the redrawn routes are made to potentially connect people to Long Island Railroad stations in Queens.
Yeah, that's a priority. That's one, enhancing connectivity. So looking at improving connections to, like I said, Long Island Railroad, but also our ADA accessible stations currently and future proposed ADA accessible stations.
Thank you.
An important point is that in addition to just generally improving the connections, they're adding routes which are specifically designed to make those connections, and the team can provide more detail. It's a really important feature of this. Other Haltis.
The limited bus routes are now, did I hear right? They're now going to run every 10 minutes?
Not
From
all
6, okay.
Not all of them, but
Okay.
yes, most of them will be running every 10 minutes or better.
Okay, and how do we pick which ones are going to run?
They're really the high ridership corridors that we've
Okay.
chosen that really
Right.
are complementing the subways, which is obviously more frequent.
Right, or some of them go to the railroad? the way.
And there are a lot of customers in the outer part that are really connecting, using the bus to get to the subway and taking the subway into the city. So
Right.
have a very
Going
long
to the
commute,
railroad.
and that's what the rush routes also will support.
All right, great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? I just want to compliment the team. This is incredibly complex, and you are now in the middle of 14 community outreach meetings, but there's a lot of other stakeholder conversations that are going to continue. We heard about one of them earlier today from the speaker's podium. This goes on and on. Rich, any other final thoughts on this topic?
No, again, we hope to continue to bring to the board these kinds of, more strategic approaches. And again, welcome the feedback from our customers. This will only be a better service that we'll offer. I think we've already had good feedback and are making tweaks and changes as a result of the feedback. So please, this is not a foregone conclusion. We want feedback.
Mr. Chairman, I should also say that much as was done in the Bronx bus redesign when suggestions were made and the whole attempt to redraw the lines were redrawn again to meet community suggestions and expectations. The same thing was done with Queens, so we really appreciate the fact that the MTA listens to the public, makes changes, and reports back. I think that's a way to instill trust in the public, get people riding, and make the routes as good as they can be.
Okay. Thank you. That's an inspirational thought as we move to more routine board business. Thank you for that, Andrew. The minutes of the April board meeting and minutes of each of the committees have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If there are none, yahoo. The minutes are approved as distributed and corrected and otherwise made available. The Bridges, Tunnels, Joint Railroad, and New York City Transit Committees met on Monday. However, there are no items for board approval. If there are no further reports from the chairs of these committees, and I'm glancing around significantly, we will move to the capital program report. Any comments on the board matters? Okay. Capital program. Mr. Zuckerman, would you deliver the capital program report?
Yes, sir. The capital program committee met on Monday and reports the following. There are 3 procurement actions, 1 competitive and 2 ratifications for a total amount of $47 million. We recommend these items and I move them.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The items carry. Mr. Zuckerman, would you also deliver the Finance Committee report?
I will, if you'll allow me a slight augmentation to our routine, which is we did meet on Monday, and I do want to augment something you said earlier. One, I'm very happy to have your leadership and Kevin's leadership in front of us because the financial gap is meaningful, it is out there, and it's not that far away. Yeah. And New York only works because of the MTA, and the MTA therefore has to work. The budget gap has to be closed. As the recent chair of finance, I am committed, and we have been demonstrating this, that in each monthly meeting we are talking about the nature of our revenue shortfalls relative to pre-COVID and our cost increases that are here, some here and some are coming. And so that is a frequent and fervent topic of discussion at our finance committee meeting. I say that obviously all my fellow board members are on that committee, or most of them, so that is for the public to hear me say that. We are cognizant and we are aware, and we are here to work with all levels from the federal on down about how we close that gap. So I just want to say that and then move to the more routine business of the following, which is we do have 1 action item this month, which is we need board approval for our annual investment report and all agency investment guidelines. We recommend it and I move it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
All right. And there are 3 competitive procurement actions this month for $17.2 million. We recommend these and I move it.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
And there are 4 real estate action items this month described on, I don't know why we tell the page numbers for these items, but these are, for whatever reason, we're calling these out pages 44 to 58 of the board book distributed this meeting. We recommend these items and I move them.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposition or abstention? The real estate items are approved.
And so ends the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Neil. There's one additional item to discuss, and I'll call on Board Member Mahaltzis for the motion.
Chair Lieber, I'd like to make a motion to convene an executive session to discuss matters a personnel matter pursuant to Section 105, Section 1E of the New York State Public Offices Law. I need
Second?
a motion?
All in
Okay.
favor? Any opposition, abstention? All right, we're in executive session.
No, I think I have to go first. I have to.
So bad at the choreography.
Okay.
We're back on the record and in session.
Okay. While in executive session, the board discussed and voted affirmatively on a personnel matter. So we're good.
Okay. So now we get to move on to the dessert of the meal, which is hopefully some good news. Board, members of the public, it's my pleasure today to honor two heroes of the subway who saved a man's life in our system last week. NYPD Detective Henry Greco and police officer Jason Macaluso were patrolling the Grant Avenue A station on May 18th when they saw Suleiman Rafi fall onto the tracks. We all know the roadbed is a dangerous place, and in this case, particularly so because thank you. All right, I started too quick. Thank you. I started too fast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We'll just wait till everyone gets settled. So I was saying Detective Greco and police officer Macaluso were patrolling the Grant Avenue A station on May 18th when they saw Suleiman Rafi fall onto the tracks. We all know the roadbed is a dangerous place, and in this case particularly so because Mr. Rafi is blind. With the train about to pull into the station, Detective Greco and Officer Macaluso had to act quickly to get Mr. Rafi to safety, and they didn't waste a single second. The incident was actually captured on video by the officer's body cameras. Take a look.
Sir, you okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm glad we saw you.
Wow. I know we're all incredibly moved by what you did. Thank you. Rich, would you say a few words?
Thank you. Obviously, we're all thankful for his safety and the best and only outcome we could have prayed for. Some say he was lucky, but the detective and the officer were at the right place at the right time. Truth be told, 3.5 weeks on this job, I can tell you that the acts of heroism you just saw are happening all the time by the NYPD and our transit employees. So thank you for your actions. I want to thank Jano, the mayor, and NYPD for everything that they're doing for our employees to keep our passengers safe. Jano?
Okay. Are we ready for? Oh. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We actually have a surprise for Detective Greco and Officer Macaluso. For the first time since the man you saved was taken by EMS to the hospital, the last time you saw or spoke with him, Suleiman Rafi wanted to be here to share this moment with you and thank you himself. I'm delighted to welcome to MTA headquarters Suleiman Rafi. Bring close. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to say a few words, sir?
Um, I want to say thank you for the officers who rescued me last week. Without you, I would never be here today. So I'm grateful for you being there at the right time. And when I heard your voices, I knew I'd be okay. And I'm okay today. And again, from the bottom of my heart, you're my friends for life, for saving my life. And I really appreciate you. Also want to thank the Trauma Center at Brooklyn Hospital for taking care of me last Wednesday. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Now it's my honor to present Detective Henry Greco and Police Officer Jason Macaluso with the highest honor the MTA provides to non-employees. In honor of your quick thinking, courage, and selfless act of heroism on May 18, 2022 at the Grant Avenue Station, the MTA hereby recognizes your bravery. And I'll read from the certificate. On that date, you observed a man fall onto the tracks, Mr. Suleiman Rafi.
Yes.
And at risk to your own safety, immediately provided assistance. With the train arriving in the station, you alerted the operator to the emergency and pulled the victim back onto the platform, saving his life.
They lift me up with their hand, they carried me up.
Thank you for being heroes of the subway. Detective Greco.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's come. We'll get a group shot after. Hold on one second. And Officer Jason Macaluso, come close over here. Yes, would you invite the officers to say a few words, Detective?
Just want to thank everybody for having us here. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we don't see ourselves as heroes at all. We think anybody would have done the same thing. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. May I give you a hug?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Just
we're
thank
gonna
you.
we're going to take photos.
No, please, I don't care.
Okay. And we're going to ask the Chief of the Housing Division, Chief Madri, to say a few words as well, please.
Yes, please. Okay.
This is put you on the spot.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just really quick, and I just really admire these two officers because you asked them, speak, and Detective Greco gets up here and just says, "Oh no, we just did our job." But I know about these two guys. I used to do a lot of things when I was in charge of Brooklyn. They do a lot for the community. They work with the youth when we used to run sports programs. During the whole COVID pandemic, they got food trucks to come out into the Brownsville community to serve people who were dealing with, food insecurity. These two officers do an awful lot for the community. They go above and beyond for the community, and they truly are heroes. So, guys, thank you for what you do, not only in this specific incident, but what you do every day, because you make the difference in this city.
Thank you for speaking. Okay, now we're going to take photos. We're going to all move over here just to take a photo. Come with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just get the officers.
Then if the press has questions, we'll take a few on-topic questions if you have for the officers or for the gentleman who was on the tracks. Do that in just a moment.
on the floor behind you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, hi, I'm Chief Landry. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really, seriously. Good luck on the new. Hey, thank you. Thank you, please.
All right, anybody back here have questions? All right, Clayton, we get a microphone, please.
Hi, this
Just
is
got a couple of on-topic questions.
real quick. If Mr. Solomon could answer this, I'm just wondering how often, sir, how often do you ride the subway? Where were you heading that day?
Okay. I was coming from work. I do trip every day. It's my way coming home from work and going to work at the same station. But for some reason that day I misstepped, and things happen. But I've been doing this trip for 17 years, going to work at same agency in Grand Avenue Station with the A train. But last Wednesday, just misstepped. Right.
Okay.
Real quick, Jano, were there tactile warning strips at that station?
No, we're not going to do that here. Anything else for the guests? You'll have plenty of opportunity to ask all the questions in a news conference. Anything else for the guests? No? All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. The meeting is
So
adjourned.
moved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Make sure we're live. Everybody can hear, right? Okay, fabulous.
Okay. Good afternoon. As I said at the outset of my comments, this has been an incredibly tough week for, obviously, for people in Texas, but also for New Yorkers and especially subway riders. The acknowledgement that we had at the end of the in the ceremony at the end of the board meeting, I think, is also a reminder of the good things that are happening. That is a case where what the mayor has said has directed, which is that not only do we have transit cops on platforms and on trains and in stations, but that police officers from other commands, in this case it was the Housing Bureau, are doing tours and inspections in the subway system. Those are the guys, Detective Greco and Officer Macaluso, who saved Mr. Raifi. So those are, I think, signs of the impact that the approach that the city and the NYPD are taking is having effect. Another data point was yesterday when there was a woman in the system who was buying a Metro card at the machine. Somebody came up behind her, started pushing on her and trying to grab her backpack, and there was an officer in the station who heard the commotion and came in and made an arrest. Where was that? Somebody remind me? Okay, well, we'll give you that if you're interested. We'll give you that information. So I'm seeing more and more of these. Obviously, it's too early to say there's a really positive trend, especially on a week where something as terrible as the Q train happens. But there are data points that suggest there is impact from the strategy of deployment that we are seeing from the NYPD. Marshall Parkway in the Bronx. Okay, so with that, Mr. Minton.
Great. For those who are joining us by Zoom, remember, use the hand-raising feature. We'll know you want to ask a question. We go first to David Meyer of the New York Post, who is approaching a milestone birthday. David, welcome.
Which is, I'm going to be 31, to be clear. I'm just joking that I'm turning 40 because I feel beleaguered. Jano, 2 questions, if you don't mind. First is on Omni. I'm wondering if we could get an update. I know it's been discussed before that there's been some issues getting the physical cards to retail, and I'm also wondering when the fare card machines will be coming, and if you're running behind or anything's wrong there.
So I think we'll have to give you some follow-up. There initially, it's no secret, there was initially the retail network development took a little while to unfold. There were definitely some challenges with getting some of the major retailers who had committed to this to train their folks and to make the cards more visible in CVS, Walgreens. I don't want to call anyone out in particular, but it was those retail chains who during the COVID were a little slower than we had hoped. So I think we've made significant progress. We'll give you some follow-up specifics so you can report on those, but I just don't have those handy.
You don't know when the machines are coming? The vending machines?
I'll provide that.
Fair enough. Okay, and the second question is just, I'm wondering, obviously we've been talking about security and safety for a long time,
Yes.
and then we had this horrible thing happen this weekend. I'm wondering if there, twofold question, if there are any new ideas or new things that you've discussed specifically since Sunday's shooting to add to the response that you've already, started, and specifically on gun interdiction, if you could talk about specific, technology or other strategies that you might be considering or discussing with the mayor and whomever.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into sort of private discussions, but listen, we everything that is being looked at in terms of gun interdiction, we're interested in. So we are definitely getting into those discussions seriously. There are a lot of different technologies out there. I would say very few of them have been used in super high volume locations. They rely on technologies that identify guns by shape, but we're looking closely at all of those technologies as part of our effort to upgrade security. But coming back to the basics, which is we know that among other things, what does work is some responsible, even-handed, and non-discriminatory fare evasion enforcement, because even since there's been a little more focus on that recently, and the numbers have, as Chief Wilcox reported on, the numbers are up, they are getting loaded guns. And also, we had again and again stories, and we can provide these to you, where, somebody was in the system, whether doing something improper. There was a cop on the platform, there was a cop on the train. They intervened, loaded gun. So there's been a series of loaded gun arrests. The mayor's talked about how many guns they've taken off the streets. But we're starting to see the impact of the presence of police officers in the system. But stopping people before they come into the system with weapons is also part of the goal, and we're definitely appreciative that the police department is starting to pay more attention to that.
All right, the Mosholu Parkway situation was yesterday at 8:57 a.m. if anybody's looking to follow up on what the chairman was talking about. Jose Martinez on the end from the city. Jose.
Hi, Giano. Two questions, and I just blanked on both of them. Number one, can you follow up at all? Has there been any follow-up at all with Mayor Adams or with City Hall in terms of the issue with the drug use near the overdose prevention centers?
Yeah.
And my second question, I'll let you answer this one, and then I'll come back to me.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we alerted City Hall to the fact that we respect the decision to have these safe injection centers. But in the case of 181st Street, what was happening is when that facility would close, people who had been given drug paraphernalia, safe hypodermic needles and all the other works, were then going down into the subway and using in the system. And not only was that incredibly alarming for the passengers, but we were ending up with literally thousands of needles on the tracks. So we raised the issue with City Hall and with the, and you wrote about it a couple weeks ago, and now the mayor said that he wants that facility, and I believe others as well, to stay open 24 hours so that they don't have these kinds of collateral damage effects on the neighborhood. And I very much appreciate the quick response once that issue had been brought to his attention.
Second question is, some of your public commenters today raised the possibility, or raised their concerns rather, at having to still be doing in-person assessments for Access-a-Ride. Is there any thought to going back on that policy to having people test for eligibility by not being in person? And what's the value of in-person?
Honestly, Jose, I am not conversant on that issue. We will come back to you with a response that is informed. I just don't know that issue. It's really the first time I'm sure it's been raised before in a public setting, but we heard about it from a couple people today, so I want to get more educated.
All right, let's go out east, representing the good people of Long Island, Alfonso Castillo of Newsday on the Zoom equipment, sir. Alfonso, good afternoon.
Hello. Hi, Jano. Thanks for the presentation on Monday about all the different projects in the capital construction. That was really informative. I've got a couple of questions coming out of that, one on East Side Access and one on Third Track. On East Side Access, the gentleman who gave the presentation, whose name escapes me, I think
the project executive, his name is Rob Troop. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. He said as clearly as I've heard, even though it's something that we've kind of all known, that once East Side Access is in place, the Long Island Railroad is going to see a significant reduction in service in Penn Station. I know it is a net gain overall, but what do you say to people who work near Penn Station, take a subway train near Penn Station, for whom East Side Access is just going to be a service reduction?
Okay, well, my suggestion is why don't you wait until a couple of weeks until we put out the service plan and before we move into full criticism mode. My own view is there's a lot of service to Penn now, and there will be a lot of service in the future. And on top of that, people are going to have the option to go to East Midtown, which happens to be, by most measures, the center of the knowledge economy in the United States of America. So we think we're giving a big upgrade to our friends in Long Island on top of the benefit of now having for the first time reverse commuting capacity, which is going to help Long Island businesses. So there'll be more service overall, there'll be more options, and there will continue to be a lot of service to Penn Station, which not everyone loves right now, and one of the reasons we're trying to dramatically improve it, and that's a Governor Hochul priority.
Well, let's just stay on Zoom with Peter Haskell of CBS 880 Radio. Peter, just need you to unmute. There you go.
Yep, thank you. I want to ask you about the shooting, and just in terms of the cops, how many cops have been added this year, if you can help me with that? How many more cops do you think you need? And you acknowledged earlier riders are scared. What do you say to them about what's going on in the system now?
Well, I think the number that the police department stated they've added 1,000 cops to the Transit Bureau. On top of that, they're dramatically increasing the presence of cops by bringing people who are topside in the precincts and just patrolling at the street level into the stations, including even the Housing Bureau. And those are the cops it was Housing Bureau cops making a patrol in Grant Avenue Station on the A train who rescued that man who had fallen onto the tracks dramatically. So that itself, I think, is the proof positive of the benefit of, in addition to the 1,000 increase in the Transit Bureau's force, those are the full-time transit cops, you have a lot more patrol and presence from these cops the NYPD officers who operate above grade in the precincts and in the Housing Bureau and so on. So I think it's been a dramatic improvement. The other thing that has really improved things is that the NYPD has responded to my request, or the MTA's request, that we have cops more present on the platforms and on the trains. And the mayor himself, who was a transit cop who rode the trains for years as part of his duty, has said that he believes there needs to be more police presence on the trains. We're starting to see it. It's starting to make a difference. And I think that over time, obviously, this week is a terrible week. This week, I cannot say to any New York City subway rider, don't feel afraid, because what happened is a terrifying nightmare. But I believe in the plan that the mayor has given, and even more, I believe in the commitment that he and the police commissioner have made.
All right, just staying with Zoom a moment. Alfonso Castillo did have a second question. We're going to stay with Zoom to get that. Alfonso, come on back.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I'll keep it short. Regarding a third track, when it was discussed on Monday, I think what we heard was that substantial completion in December, which would be on time, but that there are elements of the project that are going to go into sometime next year. Was that always the case, or are there some components of this plan that have fallen behind, understanding that the track and service on the track will be operational by the end of the year?
No, nothing has fallen behind, and we'll go through it line by line with you, because I don't want there to be misunderstanding based on semantics. What we've always said is that we're going to put the project into service this year, and we're going to do that. As you know, Alfonso, finishing up a major project involves all kinds of punch list items. The contractor has to provide manuals. They have to provide, as-built construction drawings. This is the usual process for finishing up a major project, especially on the paperwork and the resolution of, all the small cost issues. So this project is exactly on schedule. I don't want that to be misunderstood, but we're happy to take you through, chapter and verse. It's on the schedule that was set, 4 years ago when it began.
Well, let's move on here to Skylar Woodhouse of Bloomberg News. Skylar, good afternoon.
Hi, Jano. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I wanted to ask, you're talking about ridership in the central business districts. I was wondering what is being done to, bring that ridership back. I mean, I know people aren't coming back to the offices at a fast-paced here, but are you talking with any companies about, possible ways to, make sure that when they are coming into the office, it is by the subway. Are you having any conversations around that?
Well, the first thing we did is to create, the old-fashioned way, which is to create discounts to try to lure our customers back. And that was, what you know as the Lucky 13, the automatic weekly unlimited ticket after you tap 12 times. So we're doing that. We did a significant campaign, marketing campaign. Welcome Back New York, which continues. We are working with individual companies and with the Partnership for New York City to get the message out about what's going on and to hear them about what issues they have in mind. We started to work with them on strategies for bulk purchases of Metro cards and ultimately of Omni system, of Omni fares, so that they can provide transit as a benefit for their workforce. And we are supporting efforts to make sure that the old transit check, which is the sort of pre-tax, the pre-tax deduction which goes to transit, the federal transit benefit can be untangled so that people can access those funds so they can use them for transit. Right now, in many cases, they're caught up in an account where they don't have access to it because they're not riding as frequently. So all of those things we're doing. The biggest thing that we're doing, Skylar, is we're trying to make sure that the subway system is safe and that it feels safe, because that is the number one issue that we're hearing from companies and from leadership organizations like the New York City Partnership.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, moving on to Kevin Duggan of AM New York. Kevin.
Hey, John. Can you hear me all right? My first question I've got too is a bit of a follow-up on what Skylar was asking about. You had those interesting maps juxtaposing where ridership is slowly to come back and where it's almost pre-pandemic ridership in outer boroughs and working class areas. I was wondering how that has affected your thinking. Are you thinking of, has that affected at all how you're planning to run service in these areas where there's a lot of demand coming back? I see it's also looking at the map of where the ridership is coming back, like, Jackson Heights, Queens, East New York, Brooklyn. Those are a lot of areas where the city ticket would be a very, interesting option for people as well. So is that influencing maybe future discounts or any other changes of how you're approaching the return of ridership?
Well, I appreciate the question, because since we offered that discount on city ticket, $5 for any trip within the city off peak, we have actually tripled the percentage of commuter rail rides that are being taken by people within, from New York City station to another New York City station. So there's a significant move and a significant take-up of New Yorkers who are opting for a faster commute, which we've now made affordable on commuter rail rather than maybe relying on a longer subway ride. So we're thrilled about that. We want to encourage that. There's no question there's a little more room on the commuter railroads because post-COVID ridership, although commuter railroads have actually been coming back pretty fast, we want to take advantage of that and make sure that New York City folks get the benefit of that. As for future service adjustments, look, we are definitely looking at the way the service pattern is emerging. Contrary to some of the public discussion, the peak has been reestablished. The peaking is definitely back, but it is at lower levels of ridership. So what we're looking at is maybe we can provide additional capacity to some times of day or some times of the week that need more service. And no secret that we're especially focused on the nights and weekends, where the percentage take-up has been stronger. There is a lot of discretionary ridership, and we want to encourage and reinforce discretionary ridership.
Thank you. And then my second one is, I wanted to check in again on where you're standing on the subway station restrooms. You've mentioned in the past the concerns are about safety of staff or people, using drugs in the bathrooms, which I feel like those are things that probably happened before the pandemic. So what is different at this point that's still holding up the reopening, or is it just not a priority for you guys anymore?
I don't know if you have noticed it, but there has been an increase in public drug use and in the impact of folks who are struggling with both drug use and mental health issues in public space in New York in general, and especially in our mass transit system. So, respectfully, I don't accept the premise of the question. There has been an upsurge, number one. Number two, as I said from the beginning, the issue is we are way, way, way short of cleaners. That is one of the issues that Rich Davey has undertaken, which is to redevelop the workforce at New York City Transit that does cleaning. So that is, two issues here. One is we need more cleaners so we can actually accomplish the work. And two is we need a strategy that allows cleaners to do their work and to feel safe and to be safe. Both of those issues are being undertaken. And, I'm respectful of everybody wanting to open the bathrooms. I feel like right now what New Yorkers are crying out for is first and foremost safety and a lot of other core issues. But we are looking at opening the bathrooms once we can accomplish those twin goals of enough cleaners to do the work and a safety strategy for our cleaning workforce.
All right, we move on to Dave Colon of Streets Blog, sporting the number 3 in the MLB New York Mets. Dave, good afternoon.
Heartbreaking loss last night, but we'll be back. Jana, I had a couple for you. One is a couple months ago we talked about all-door bus boarding, and you mentioned that you wanted to kind of hold off on starting a pilot until more people were using Omni. I'm curious if you've thought about whether instituting all-door bus boarding with all the readers being there already could spur the use of Omni for people and encourage them to use it.
It's a great hypothetical, but at where we are right now, if we did all-door bus boarding, 85% of the riders who don't use Omni would not be eligible to board at the rear. And that, that's not, as far as I'm concerned, a fair situation. And obviously, we are coming back from a period of time when people were encouraged to board at the rear and buses were free. So we're trying to reestablish fare payment as part of our bus system because we all want the system to be there. But the principal issue, it wouldn't be fair to say, open the door and then try to only limit it to people who are paying Omni because we're not there yet. That's the bottom line. Now, the other point that I hope that you will cover is that all-door boarding is only one small piece of a much bigger equation of how do we make buses faster in New York. And right now, there are opportunities to really speed it up. One, bus redesign. We believe passionately that those redesigns are going to give us faster service, less meandering routes, more direct routes, and specific routes that are designed to stop less frequently and carry people quickly to major destinations like subways and commuter railroads. Two is we need bus camera enforcement. We need to be, together with the city, we need a heck of a lot more bus camera enforcement because it works. All of the evidence is when people get a ticket, their probability of getting another ticket for being in the bus lane is way down. Three, we need to convince the major trucking outfits in New York to disincentivize their drivers from parking in the bus lane. A lot of them are paying lots and lots of, millions of dollars in fines, but they've worked it into their business model, and we want to discourage it. So I'm going to start discussions with some of these major trucking outfits, utilities. I don't want to name people like UPS and FedEx and Fresh Direct and so on, but those big companies, Verizon, whatever. But we want them to disincentivize their drivers from blocking the bus lane instead of just paying tickets and saying, well, this is part of the cost of doing business in New York. And the other thing we can do is work with Mayor Adams to make sure that we really do get to all the bus lanes that he has set as his goal. And we're hot on the trail of our friends at DOT to say we need to move forward. If we're going to make Mayor Adams' goal, we need to be rolling out one bus lane after another, chop, chop, right? So those are our goals. And I think all of those things, each of them, but collectively, they show a path to faster bus service, especially compared to 15% of the riders being able to use the back door.
And then there's a The high-level schedule for congestion pricing says that in June there's supposed to be the public notice of the availability for the environmental assessment for it. So yes or no? I mean, can you say whether we're going to see it? We're not going to see it in June?
No, because we are still struggling with the federal government's 425 comments on the environmental assessment. And in some cases, we're working with the feds to nail down what exactly do you want us to do. And that has had an impact that is right now, at least a month on the schedule. The team is working their tails off to answer all those questions, to do new modeling, to do new analysis, to recalibrate everything in response to what the federal agencies' comments have gotten to. And it is having an effect on the schedule, and we're working to minimize it, but I don't want to mislead it. June is by the boards.
So had they knocked a month back for everything then, or?
We're working to, when the issues come to rest, we will definitely update all of you, but our determination, I mean, the governor has been direct, has been clear with me. She wants congestion pricing done, ASAP. And we're trying to comply with that original schedule, which we arrived at after a lot of wrestling with different agencies of the federal government. But right now, we are trying to get over this one hurdle, which is the 425 comments that require us to make changes to the draft environmental assessment document.
All right, two more, one in the room, one on Zoom. Let's do this first. Clayton Gusa of the New York Daily News.
Hi, Jano. Good to see you. First, I have three, but first I just want to re-ask what I asked earlier about the tactile warning strips.
Sure.
They weren't at the, they didn't appear to be at that station where that gentleman fell.
Yeah.
Are there plans to bring them to the station? How many stations do not have those strips, and what's the timeline to bring them
It's
there?
a fair question, and I'm sorry you didn't get to ask it before, but I'm glad we're asking it here. So you were right. That station has the old-fashioned yellow paint with the grit in it that was the non-ADA compliant way of marking the edge. It is among approximately 80 stations that are not yet ADA compliant with tactile warning strips. On Monday, Carmel Arroyo, I think, gave an update on that is actually an ongoing current project to knock out those last 80 stations. Which has been in the works for some time, but is actually physically ongoing right now.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask about crew availability. I'm looking at my spreadsheet of your service delivery
you have a
positions.
Yeah.
You're down in service delivery in the subways for the third straight month. You're down almost 100 from November. You're up only 100 from when you started, and that was already down from about 800 from pre-pandemic.
Okay.
You guys attributed 10,000 train delays last month to lack of crew availability. I mean, Lizette laid out what you guys are doing for hiring, but you're seeing things go in the wrong direction for subway crew availability.
So I'm not sure I agree with your numbers. You seem a little cranky today,
They're your numbers.
Clayton. Yeah. Did you have a bad time on the Amtrak train?
Yeah, I'm going to write about it.
Yeah. We're all going to hear about the Amtrak train, but, I would never say anything bad about Amtrak.
You'd never say anything bad.
Look, my understanding is that the lost runs due to crew availability have gone down from 600 to 200 in the time frame since I've been working on this with the team. We'll check it. I trust your numbers, but those are the numbers of our argument. So I don't think we've slid backwards quite as much. Rich, if you're you're welcome to join me for this one. Look, Clayton. There's no question. There's no mystery to this. We took a series of aggressive actions to try to deal with it, which is the retirees were one piece, creating incentives for folks to take OT were another piece, actually giving specific incentives for people to delay vacations during Christmas was another piece. But the most important one is civil service hiring, because these are civil service jobs. And what's happening is, there's no mystery to this, is that the civil service lists are not yielding as many takers as pre-COVID. That's the reality. So we have, we increased the number of trainers, we compressed the pace of training, we did all those things, and yet it has not gone quite as fast as we had hoped. So we've lost about a quarter. And the bus operators, we are on schedule vis-a-vis our hiring, so I hope you'll acknowledge that. But with respect to conductors, I think we're going to be, instead of Q3 getting back to full levels of service, we're going to be in Q4, and train operators will now be the first quarter of 23. But as we talk about this, I think it's just important to recognize that this is a function of the way the market is, the market is reacting. Is that there are a lot of people hiring, there are a lot of government jobs because people sign up for multiple civil service lists, right? And we are getting a slightly lower yield than we used to. We are redoubling our efforts on all those other strategies that I mentioned, Clayton, which are familiar to you, about bringing retirees back and getting the existing workforce to do a little more time on the rails in order to offset it. I think our service delivery has stayed pretty solid, but you're speaking to other numbers. Rich, you want to try?
So, Clayton, just two other points to mention. Number one, we're being very transparent about this issue, right? Respectfully, it was no one sleuthing. I think Demetrius Critchlow mentioned it on his remarks on Monday that this was a challenge, right? So we're being transparent with the public that this is a challenge. That said, as Jano said, we've made progress, but there are a lot of moving pieces that we're working on for sure. But two, I do want to call out our employees, our folks who are actually stepping up. I was up at Pelham on Friday doing a tour of the Bronx redesign and chatted with some employees up there. And, they're filling shifts and runs on their break time, which we very much appreciate, right? So the people who are here working are also stepping up as well. So we just want to acknowledge that. But again, we're not where we want to be, but we're working on it.
Okay. And lastly, I wanted to ask you about Crossrail in London. Much has been written about that, it's a delayed project, but it's really transformative for that city. And it begs the question, we have plans for 3 new stops in East Harlem and the Upper East Side. We have plans for 1 new station opening up in East Grand Central. I think the general question that I get from readers is why can't we have something so nice in New York?
Okay, well, if there were a project that had as many budget and schedule problems as Crossrail that we did, do you think Clayton would be citing it as a proof of concept? I'm not as sure. Listen, what are we doing to expand the system? East Side Access, if you really want to be as dismissive as your description of it as a one-station project is, go ahead. But you'll lose credibility with me. East Side Access is transforming it's going to save millions of people over the next, generation, huge amounts of time, and land them right in the middle of the busiest business district with the highest value-added office jobs in the United States. So the idea that it is just a one-stop project is not fair, and it's not accurate. You really ought to reconsider that characterization. It is a dramatically transformative. It also addresses, everybody loves to talk about Gateway. We understand that we need more under Hudson capacity. East Side Access is our gateway because we have only one way for Long Island Railroad customers to get in and out of Manhattan. It is the backup, just the way Gateway is a backup for that existing Hudson River system. And it's going to be a dramatic improvement for people in Long Island. And we've already talked about the importance of reverse commuting. It will connect because you can now, and after Penn Access will be true equally of Penn, but because you will now be able to connect into Grand Central, you can go from Montauk to Wassaic, the full length of our region in a single station connection. So these are dramatic changes, and I would ask you to reconsider that characterization. In addition to that, we are dealing with the transit desert in the East Bronx, 4 stations, neighborhoods that have never had meaningful mass transit, cutting people in co-op cities' commutes to a job in Midtown from an hour and a quarter to an hour and a half down to 35 or 40 minutes, giving them a first-time opportunity to connect to jobs which are pretty close to them in Westchester and Connecticut. 4 stations, an area of the city that was a total, well, we don't use the phrase transit desert because they have buses, but in most parlance, not kind of a transit desert. Then we also have the Interborough Express. I mean, that we're talking about taking an existing rail line and connecting neighborhoods that have no rail service, East Flatbush, Maspeth, everything in between, and connecting people to 17 subway lines along the way. So a dramatic improvement for a huge swath of the city in that respect. East Harlem, I respectfully would recharacterize as that is making good a historic wrong, a community of color, maybe the highest rates of public housing in the city, most transit dependent, based on car ownership standards of any community in the city, and they've been left out of the rail system, promised to them in the 1940s and 50s when they knocked down the 3rd and 2nd Avenue L, now making good on that connectivity so they can get to jobs, employment, and everything New York has to offer. So I think we have a pretty serious agenda in terms of expanding the system. I don't know the Crossrail project well enough to compare and contrast. I'll have to rely on you for that. And then you add on what we're doing with the bus system, which is a dramatic, I mean, it may not be as sexy as a new rail facility, but it's a dramatic improvement when you are making buses real mass transit, as we are trying to, between the redesign of the buses and also busways, bus lanes, tram enforcement, and so on. So I'm pretty excited about the expansion agenda we have, but, I'll ride the Amtrak train with you and see how they're doing elsewhere.
All right, for the record, I think he flew back. But we move on to close it out with Dave Porter of the Associated Press joins us on Zoom. Dave.
Hi, Jana. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I just want to get back to the subway security and technology for a second. Without, obviously, you said you didn't want to divulge any of your private conversations with City Hall. In the past, you've basically said that any type of sort of airport style security or metal detectors in the subway would not be feasible, which is pretty obvious. But the mayor's recently talked about this other technology that can scan, apparently thousands of people as they walk by. And you pointed out that stuff like that isn't currently in use in high volume places like mass transit. But I wonder if I could just get your take on whether something like that might be feasible and might work, might help.
Yeah, it's a fair question, but the truthful answer is it's premature to say, and we're serious about exploring every one of these technologies. I think we will get there. It's a question of time and technology development, but every one of these things is interesting to us, and we're going to look at all of them. And I love the fact that we've got a mayor who's passionate about technological innovation and that we have as a partner in this. Because at the end of the day, the NYPD and the city have responsibility for the safety of our subway system. So this is something we need to do with them, in many cases by them. So I'm going to work with them on all of this.
All right, thanks, Jano. Thank you, Rich Davey. Thanks, everybody. And good afternoon from Lower Manhattan.